Immigration policy can have serious rights implications, yet immigration discourse across the world recently indicates that the issue is now primarily seen from a law enforcement instead of a human rights angle. The Trump administration's decision to deport millions of undocumented immigrants from the US and the Pakistani government's decision to expel Afghan refugees are reflective of this shifting attitude. Recently, we saw Los Angeles, California erupt in protests against raids conducted by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement or ICE officials to round up undocumented immigrants. ICE is known for their heavy-handedness, and the recent raids were conducted in restaurants, cafes, warehouses, and other such establishments where immigrants were known to be working. These raids are part of a series of anti-immigration policies implemented by the Trump administration since returning to the White House. This includes the use of the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to deport suspected gang members. It also includes a blanket ban on asylum access. It also includes the revocation of the temporary legal status of hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants that are in the US on parole. Now, tightening border control and expelling criminals is a sovereign right of every country. But this right is not unqualified. It has to be conducted in a humane manner that does not strip an individual of his or her dignity. Most importantly, due process has to be followed. Indiscriminately rounding up and expelling millions of undocumented immigrants that have only known the US to be their home is inhumane. Use of an age-old statute to deport suspected gang members without court convictions and due process is inhumane. Blocking asylum access for immigrants that are fleeing persecution is inhumane. And arbitrarily revoking the temporary legal status of hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants on parole and thus separating families is inhumane. It is particularly unbecoming of a country that claims to be the universal defender of civil liberties and human rights. Pakistan too has been expelling Afghan refugees since late 2023. At the time, it was estimated that Pakistan was host to 1.3 million Afghan refugees with POR cards, which is documentation issued by the UNHCR conferring refugee status, plus 800,000 Afghan refugees with ACC cards, which is documentation issued by the Pakistani government conferring temporary legal status but not refugee status, plus 1.3 million undocumented immigrants, which are immigrants who have neither POR or ACC cards. This aggregate includes the 600,000 Afghan refugees that fled to Pakistan after the Taliban took power in 2021. The first phase of the expatriation drive was launched against the 1.3 million undocumented immigrants. By February 2025, it was estimated that 800,000 had fled the country fearing deportation. The second phase of the expatriation drive was launched against the ACC card holders in March 2025, whose documentation was cancelled and they were ordered to leave the country immediately. For now, the status of the POR card holders is uncertain, although their documentation was due to expire on June 30th unless extended. This expatriation drive represents a heavy-handed approach to immigrants, two-thirds of whom have never even lived in Afghanistan. There was an uptake in cross-border violence after the Afghan Taliban took power in 2021. Pakistan believed the Afghan Taliban to be harboring TTP terrorists, but the Afghan Taliban denied involvement and the violence continued. Both the US and Pakistan cases present a critical lesson. An approach to immigration that prioritizes law enforcement and undermines human rights is neither acceptable nor a solution. It was encouraging to see the US Supreme Court step in to order the government to facilitate the return of Kilmer Abrego Garcia, who was deported to El Salvador without due process on suspicions of gang involvement. In Pakistan, the government cannot continue to hide behind the non-ratification of the 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 protocol to shun its obligations under international humanitarian laws. The Afghan refugee expatriation plan must be suspended until a more humane solution can be found. More urgently, at-risk individuals must be identified and saved from deportation. Due process is non-negotiable and human rights are inalienable.